Start off with Venezuela, and I want to get your thoughts on it. And after you share your thoughts, I've been getting some emails in regards to it, and so it's perfect. I think it's a perfect starting point. So, what do you think of that whole situation?
Okay, there's really two issues that are very important. Now, let me give you a little of my background. I joined the Marine Corps in 1964 and went through boot camp a month after the Gulf of Tonkin incident. I went through boot camp in San Diego. I was 18 years old. The Marine Corps was looking to expand for the Vietnam War, and they made it very easy to apply for flight training. I started flight training when I was 18. I got my wings when I was 20. At that point, I was literally the youngest fighter pilot in the entire world, and at least 2 years younger than all of my contemporaries that I went through flight training with. I was flying the F-4 when I was 20. I went to Vietnam in July of 1968, and I was there until March of 1970. And while I was there, I flew 834 missions. So I am exceptionally experienced in real combat. Now, during the Vietnam War, 3.5 million American servicemen served in Vietnam. They served in Vietnam. They were in a combat zone, but they were not in combat. I was actually in combat, so I'm certainly qualified to talk about warfare. There are two very important issues about Venezuela. First is the United States committing war crimes. For some reason, somebody, probably Donald Trump, has decided they needed to attack small boats under the guise of them being drug boats and being part of some cartel, the name of which was actually made up by the CIA. Venezuela is not a big supplier of drugs to the United States. Colombia is, Mexico is, Bolivia is, Ecuador is, Honduras is, but Venezuela doesn't supply very much drugs to the United States. Now, I advocate in two of the financial books that I've written that if people will learn to ask the right questions, ordinary people with ordinary access to information can come up to the correct answer to things that they're being lied to. So I'm going to ask you some questions. We know the very first boat that was sunk off Venezuela had four engines and it had 11 people on board. And it was not going to the United States. It was almost certainly going to Trinidad and Tobago, which is about 25 miles from Venezuela. So, knowing that there were four engines on the boat, was that a smuggling boat?
I would say yes.
Okay, absolutely. How many engines do you need? If you're going to go out in the ocean, how many engines do you need?
You make me nervous. I don't want to answer wrong. Uh, at least two.
Thank you. Strange enough, you're learning to ask the right questions. And when you ask the right questions, you come up with the right answers. If I was driving a boat from Venezuela to Trinidad, I would want two engines. But having four engines doesn't make anything twice as safe. So let's accept that boat was smuggling. Okay, if you're in a boat and you're going to travel 25 miles and you're carrying drugs, how many people do you need on the boat?
Four or five.
Why?
I mean, depending how much cargo would be on there. Well, I guess you wouldn't even need that many because you'd have people that would be able to unload it when you got to your destination. So two,
Keep two or three. Why would you not have just one person on the boat?
in case something happens to that one person, then the boat would just be stuck.
Nah, it's still the drugs. And if you had two people, they would think about stealing the drugs. A ton of cocaine down there, I'm told, is worth 25 million people. So if you had one guy driving the boat and a couple of people for security, you need two or three people. If you have 11 people on the boat and you know they're smuggling, what are they smuggling?
They're not. Or they're smuggling people.
Thank you.
Oh.
It was that simple. Okay. If you ask the right question, ordinary people can come up with the answer. If there were 11 people on that boat, they were smuggling people. Yes, there may have been drugs on the boat. However, we know they were smuggling people because of being 11 people on the boat. At $25 million per ton, a 100 kilos of cocaine is worth 2.5 million people. So would you rather carry cocaine or would you rather carry people? The answer is you'd rather carry cocaine. So I don't believe the story the American government is telling. So they come in, they fire a couple of rockets at the boat, and they blow up the boat, and they kill 9 of the people. Is it legal under international law to kill survivors in a shipwreck?
No.
Absolutely not. And indeed, in the manual for the United States military, we're told that there was an incident in 1918 where a British ship was sunk by a German submarine. And when the German submarine sunk the ship, there were some survivors and they were in lifeboats. The submarine surfaced and machine gunned all of the survivors. After the war, the people who ordered that shooting were tried and convicted and went to prison. And that is the classic case that it's taught to the American military. And every person that ever went through boot camp, every person that ever went through officer candidate school, every person who ever went through military ROTC is taught about war crimes and the obligation to refuse illegal orders. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We know there was an initial attack by 2 rockets on the boat, and it blew up the boat and it killed 9 of the people. 41 minutes later, the admiral who was in charge of the attack ordered 2 more missiles to be fired, and they killed the last 2 survivors. Now, the Department of War and the President of the United States are saying, well, they had an opportunity to save the cocaine. They had an opportunity to call to shore. They had an opportunity to survive, so we needed to kill them. That is a war crime. At the very least, it is cold-blooded murder, and it is a war crime. Now, as a F-4 pilot in Vietnam and as a forward air controller in Vietnam, did I kill people?
Yes.
Absolutely. That was my job. Okay. Did I kill women and children?
No.
Absolutely not. Why do you kill women and children? You know, they're not combatants. It's not an issue of that being a war crime. It's an issue of why would you shoot a kid? Why would you shoot a woman? These are not combatants. These are not people shooting at you. Okay, so except we don't know what the number is, so we can only guess. In the 800 missions I flew, did I commit murder?
Um, no.
No, I didn't. Did I kill people? Absolutely. Did I murder people? Absolutely not. These are people who were shooting at me. And this isn't an issue of whether Vietnam was a good war or a bad war. Vietnam was a very bad war. It was very stupid the United States got involved in the first place. We had no business there. The Vietnamese were never our enemies. We fought that war for the benefit of the military industrial complex. But when I went into the Marine Corps, we used to believe the government. Okay, I was 18 years old. When I went into combat, I was 20 years old. Of course, I believed the government. We didn't have access to information like you and me and the alternative media where people actually tell the truth. That didn't exist then. So that you've got this interesting situation where we were committing war crimes in Venezuela. Now, I think there have been 23 boats sunk, and there's something like 80 people total. And that's interesting because that goes back to the case of how many people do you need to run a dope deal. And the fact is, many of those boats could have been carrying drugs, and they've got an average of 3.5 to 4 people per boat, which would lend itself to believing they could be drugs. However, we don't kill people without trials in the United States. So let's go to the issue of attacking Venezuela. What threat is Venezuela to the United States?
Question that I've asked, and I have not heard a valid reason right now. There is no
They're
threat.
not our they're not our enemy. Uh, we consider Cuba an enemy, and you're not old enough to remember this, but I am. We put sanctions on Cuba in 1959 because of Castro. Well, both of the Castros are long since dead. What makes Cuba an enemy of the United States? How are they attacking us? How are they doing anything to us? And the answer is they're not. And Venezuela is not the enemy of the United States. And now it's becoming more and more and more and more obvious that the real purpose of the United States is to get their hands on Venezuela's oil. And that, again, is a war crime. And that is a crime against humanity. Do we have the ability with 25,000 troops and a submarine? And I think there's 17 ships, including the Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world. Do we have the ability to destroy Venezuela militarily?
We do. Well, let me back up a second because it depends on if you put troops on the ground, right? I mean, I had somebody, and
Okay.
I had somebody on yesterday, and he was breaking down. He actually had a map, picture that he drew: Vietnam, South Vietnam versus Venezuela. And if you put troops on the ground in Venezuela, it could turn out to be a very messy disaster.
Well, let me give you some numbers. Do you have any idea of how many American troops there were in 1968 and 1969 in Vietnam?
I do not.
About 550,000. Okay, I gave you the number 3.5 million Americans served total, but there were about 550,000 troops in Vietnam. Vietnam, granted, is Well, actually, I wouldn't be able to say this. I don't know if Vietnam's bigger or not. Venezuela's a pretty big country. Now, it's not as densely populated as Vietnam was, so I couldn't tell you without doing some reference how many people there were in each. But there are 2.5 million people in the Venezuelan militia. If the United States launched an attack on Venezuela and landed 25,000 Marines, they would be massacred. Okay. The United States has the ability to kill a lot of people, but it doesn't have the ability to win a war against a minor country.